was revealed this week that mass murderer Richard Speck, while serving a life term in prison, was videotaped with hormone-induced breasts, snorting cocaine, and having sex with a man. The film was apparently made with prison video equipment and a $300,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. Dr. James Watts, a neurosurgeon who performed the first frontal lobotomy, died this week in Washington. If you recall, a lobotomy involves drilling holes in the skull and then inserting and rotating a knife to destroy brain cells. What a genius. He'll be missed. The world have ordered their ride, the extraterrestrial, to be shut down until it can be made scarier. When the attraction reopens in 2 weeks, it will be exactly the same, but missing 6 bolts.
Good morning. It's Monday, Medal of Honor Monday. It's December the 18th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have military shorts, motivational shorts, exorcist, Ayn Rand Quote, and the Medal of Honor. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I shouldn't change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now, the military shorts.
The X-47B, a $1.5 billion drone developed by Northrop Grumman for the U.S. Navy, promised revolutionary capabilities in maritime power projection. Designed for high-risk forward missions, it could neutralize enemy air defenses, surface ships, and fighter jets. Despite significant achievements like autonomous landing on aircraft carriers and air refueling, the drone was retired in 2015. It was part of the Navy's Unmanned Carrier-Launched Airborne Surveillance and Strike AU-class program, which was scrapped in favor of a less ambitious project, the MQ-25 Stingray, a refueling drone. However, people are now talking about bringing back a program like the one for the X-47B. This suggests that its smart technology might be used again, showing us both the potential and challenges of drone technology. What do you think?
Why is it that U.S. fighter jets look dirty, but Russian and Chinese jets look clean and new? Let me explain. Most people think that the marks you see on U.S. fighter jets are battle scars from previous missions. Unlike Chinese jets, which are mainly used for air shows and displays, American fighters are put to the test constantly, collecting gunpowder residue, engine oil, and fuel gunk that sticks to the body of the aircraft. But cleaning a jet isn't just like washing your car. It takes dangerous anti-corrosion fluids and tons of water, especially near saltwater bases. Fighters kept on carriers get so dirty due to the sea, but some jets might need a paint makeover. The U.S. likes to use a matte gray for stealth, while Russians prefer a glossy camo look. They could be ahead of everyone with this blue jet. However, Chinese jets have also gone for a dark stealth paint look lately. Before, they were too busy looking great at air shows. So when you spot a dirty U.S. fighter jet, It's not just getting old, it's a sign that it has been on lots of missions.
The L-4 Grasshopper may not appear menacing, but then an American pilot strapped on bazookas and started blowing up German tanks. He went by Bazooka Charlie and helped turn a fragile observation airplane into a fiery destroyer. In September 1944, the U.S. 4th Infantry was outnumbered and facing 262 German tanks, including the brand-new Panther tanks. As the Germans advanced, their firepower devastated American ground troops, but little did they know, an L-4 was flying above them. With its top speed of 75 miles per hour and a simple frame of fabric and steel, the Germans may not have noticed the small prop plane hovering over them until it started raining fire from the 6 bazookas strapped to its struts. Bazooka Charlie made multiple passes, each time exposing himself to heavy fire from the enemy. By the end of the day, he had fired 16 rounds and destroyed 2 Panther tanks and an armored truck. By the end of the war, he had destroyed at least 6 German tanks. That got the Germans' attention. In 1963, a routine training flight turned into a life-changing emergency for one young RAF pilot. He had been soaring at 29,000 feet on the last day of his advanced flying training when all of a sudden a warning light told him the plane's only engine was on fire. Trusting the instruments, he shut down the engine and activated the flame retardant, knowing it would make the engine inoperable. After calmly calling out Mayday, he then pointed the nose down and tried to maintain enough speed to keep him from stalling. For 5 torturous minutes he descended over North Wales. But at 800 feet, his heart sank when he noticed power lines strung across the runway he was about to use. Rather than eject, he attempted to save the plane, and nearly did until crosswinds pushed him sideways off the runway and into a row of telephone poles. The pilot nearly lost his legs in the crash, but his coolness remained an example to other pilots for years to come. It was only later that he learned the alarm had malfunctioned. There had been no fire after all.
He was a popular radio personality in the late 1930s, known for his comedic impersonations. His film career was just beginning to take off when he put it on hold to serve his country. He was Art Carney, and though he won an Oscar in 1974 for the film Harry and Tonto, he'll forever be remembered as Ed Norton, Jackie Gleason's wacky sidekick on The Honeymooners. Carney was a light machine gunner with the 28th Infantry Division's 30 caliber machine gun squad, which saw intense fighting at Saint-Lô, France in July of 1944. He had just taken up a position in the early morning hours of August 15th when a German mortar shell blew him in the air, nearly taking off his right leg. Medics were able to save the leg, though it would be an inch shorter, and he'd walk with a limp for the rest of his life. Carney would spend a year in and out of hospitals recuperating and was awarded the Purple Heart. Art Carney's simple gravestone simply says, "Only love lasts."
How do helicopters land in the most dangerous seas like the North Sea? Let me explain. They rely on a system known as the bear trap. It's found on most warships and aircraft carriers, and is key for a safe landing in treacherous seas. As the helicopter approaches the landing pad on the deck, it begins the landing process by deploying a line equipped with a specialized attachment. This attachment connects to a heavier cable that extends through the middle of the bear trap and is supported by a strong winch below the flight deck. The cable is then pulled up, keeping a tight connection to the helicopter using an automated hydraulic system. But the pilot must keep control at all times and change the helicopter's power to match the force made by the winch. The syncing of the helicopter with the system means the helicopter copies the ship's movement. However, it's not over yet. The winch slowly reduces the helicopter's power and brings it closer to the landing pad. If everything goes to plan, this should mean a smooth landing.
You might think this has to be one of the dumbest Russian tactics when you see Russian helicopters shooting salvos of unguided rockets at a Ukrainian position. This tactic is called lofting. This technique allows helicopters to attack enemy positions without entering a dead zone and is more successful than you think. To avoid radar detection, helicopters fly as low as possible to their targets, then steeply climb and launch the rockets, sending them to their targets. At the same time, they eject infrared decoy flares to counter manpads. This method gives the rockets a greater amount of energy at the moment of launch, which also increases their range. Pilots use their onboard computers to increase rockets' accuracy. They also use kits on their unguided rockets that can convert them into guided rockets. According to various sources, Russia upgraded its Ka-52 helicopters, which can engage targets over 15 kilometers away, which is beyond the range of Ukrainian manpads, which have a maximum range of 6 kilometers.
Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. America's best days are yet to come. Our proudest moments are yet to be. Our most glorious achievements are just ahead. America remains what Emerson called her 150 years ago, the country of tomorrow. May every dawn be a great new beginning for America, and every evening bring us closer to that shining city upon a hill.
An F-16 did something that you'll never see again when it shot down 3 J-21s. Let me explain. While flying over Hungary, a British warning aircraft detected a huge threat. 6 Serbian J-21 jets had launched an attack on a factory in Bosnia's Banja Luka area. They needed to act quickly, and the team on board told the intruders to exit the no-fly zone or face consequences. At the same time, the crew reached out to a pair of F-16s, already on patrol near Mostar in southern Bosnia. Even though they were low on fuel, the F-16 pilots raced to the scene, locating the Serbian J-21s and warning them. But the Serbian pilots didn't listen and carried on with their airstrikes, violating the no-fly zone. One of the F-16 pilots decided to take action. Using his radar-guided missile, he destroyed one of the Serbian aircraft. The remaining J-21s quickly took action. They went out of the F-16's line of fire, but the F-16 chased them and shot down 2 more.
He wanted to come in as late as possible, so he dropped his remaining bombs on the enemy to the west of the runway, which also kept them from advancing on Myers. In his first attempt to land, Major Fisher realized that he was coming in too fast for the runway, which was actually shorter than its reported length. In what must have been a heartbreaking moment for Myers, who thought rescue was impossible, he waved at Major Fisher just as he gave his A-1 full power and became airborne again. Once in the air, he turned his plane around and approached in the opposite direction. Due to his flying skills and maybe some divine intervention, he was able to land this time. After skidding for some distance, he came to a stop off the end of the runway, all while facing heavy enemy fire. He turned his plane around on the grass and began slowly making his way back as he was looking for Major Myers. Moments later, he spotted Myers running towards the aircraft.
And that was the 10 military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, 6 motivational shorts.
Sometimes you need to get knocked down before you can really figure out what your fight is and how you need to fight it. Sometimes you need to feel the pain and sting of defeat to activate the real passion and purpose that God predestined inside of you. God says in Jeremiah, I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Hear me well on this day. This day when you have reached the hilltop and you are deciding on next jobs, next steps, careers, further education. You would rather find purpose than a job or a career.
Why would you not go for it? Why would you not take a chance? At one point in time, you got to take a chance on you.
Wake up. We have a moral burden to bear, and that's the adventure of our life. That's the other thing so interesting about the Abrahamic story is that God calls Abraham out of his luxurious slumber and sends him into a catastrophe. Tyranny, starvation, war, brutal. But he has the adventure of his life. You might say, well, it's the adventure of your life that justifies the catastrophe of your life. It's not some simple-minded, juvenile hedonism or desire for comfort. That's not what we're built for. We're built for the adventure of our lives. And where do you find that? You find that in orienting yourself to the highest possible good in all ways and speaking the truth forthrightly along that pathway.
A lot of the great early scientists were independently wealthy, or they had a patron like an artist, and they were left the hell alone. It's really what scientists should be looking for, I would say, instead of government funding, because along with that government funding comes exactly the sort of problems that we're discussing right now, which is, well, is this going to be of broad public benefit? And the answer is, well, if I knew that, I would turn it in. Well, I would turn it into a company in a second, right? If you knew for certain that your new discovery was going to be of broad, significant economic benefit, you'd raise money and you'd have entrepreneurs on board in 2 seconds. And so that problem would take care of itself. This is a useful thing to know about your wives. I mean, it's true in interpersonal communication in general, but, your wife is going to sit down with you and lay out her complaints about whatever happens to be happening. And you might think that you know what to do about that, and you might think that what she wants is for you to do something about it and to provide an answer. Now, that also might be your impatience because you want to just get to the cut to the chase and solve the damn problem. And so it's not all moral virtue on your side that you actually know what to do. But what you have to understand is that when someone's first walking through a problem set, part of what they're trying to do is to figure out what the problem is. And so unless you let them lay out the problem landscape without interference, you don't even know that the problem you're solving is the correct problem. So we'll make it public in every possible way. And I'll bring to bear every single bit of public pressure I can possibly muster on this particular topic. And we will watch over the next 3 years exactly how this plays out. So if the college wants to re-educate me, they're more than welcome to try. But if they think they're going to do it in secret, they've got another thing coming.
And that was the 5 motivational shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the poem If by Rudyard Kipling.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream, and not make dreams your master, if you can think, and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose, and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
And that was If by Rudyard Kipling. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a few words from an exorcist.
So an example of a binding prayer would be by the power of the precious blood, which is the one that almost all exorcists say you should start it with. So by the power of the precious blood, by the holy name of Jesus, because he said, by my name you will cast out demons. You can also put in things like by the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Saint Michael, etc. I command the demon of, and then you name the problem that you're having. So it's fear. I command the demon of fear to stop afflicting me, go to the foot of the cross, because ultimately they're Christ's slaves, so he determines what their disposition is. Go to the foot of the cross to receive your sentence. And if you do something as simple as that, a lot of times people will find it will just shut off.
Wow. Christian, you have real power in the spiritual realm, and you should use it.
And that was a Catholic priest that does exorcisms. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand quote of the day. It is generally known that most universities now depend on government research projects as one of their major sources of income. The government grants to those senior researchers establish every recipient as an unofficially official power. It is his influence, his ideas, his theories, his preferences in faculty hiring that will come to dominate the school in a silent, unadmitted way, unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand quote of the day. Thank you. And now the story of the first living Medal of Honor recipient, Delta Force.
In the early morning of October 22nd, 2015, Thomas Paine and his team stormed a prison in Iraq. Their target were two multi-story buildings holding over 70 hostages facing execution. Just as the special forces were engaged in a fierce firefight with the insurgents, the building suddenly caught fire while the hostages were still trapped inside. Time to free all the civilians unharmed was running out at a rapid pace. For what happened next, Thomas Paine would receive the Medal of Honor, America's highest military award. Paine was a motivated and very experienced Delta Force soldier with more than 13 years of service. In 2012, he had even won the Best Ranger competition, an annual 62-hour selection in which only 2 soldiers emerged victorious. In the process, Paine didn't let his severe shrapnel injury, suffered 2 years earlier during a deployment to Afghanistan, slow him down in any way. He deployed to every trouble spot in the world a total of 17 times to demonstrate his skills on special operations. Paine's numerous trainings included a sniper course, as well as the jump master and tandem master qualifications, which means that he can carry another person who has never skydived before when free-falling. On his current deployment, Paine was in northern Iraq as a deputy team leader to assist in the fight against the so-called Islamic State, which had captured large parts of the country. On October 22, 2015, Paine's team was tasked with freeing more than 70 Iraqi hostages held in the northern city of Al-Havija. The Special Forces had spent an entire week planning the mission and preparing for any contingencies they might face. When new reconnaissance images suddenly showed freshly dug graves outside the prison, it became clear that the hostages could soon be executed. As a result, the task force was given the green light for the mission, and the operators, along with their Kurdish partner forces, boarded several helicopters, which took off toward the IS stronghold shortly thereafter. The Kurdish forces consisted of a unit simply known as the Counterterrorism Group, or CTG, which is part of the Peshmerga and has worked with Americans in the past.
Just before dawn, the Chinooks touched ground again, and the special forces rushed through the stirred-up sand toward the prison. After the Kurdish counterterrorism unit unsuccessfully attempted to blast an entrance through the prison wall, the Americans used ladders to climb over. While climbing over the prison wall, however, they came under heavy fire, seriously wounding Delta Force soldier Joshua Wheeler. Once on the other side, dust and smoke made it nearly impossible to see. Relying on his training, Payne led his team to the first building, where his medic left to help tend to the wounded man. The Kurdish troops were initially reluctant to move forward, but Payne and his comrades motivated them to advance despite the adverse conditions. On his orders, they successfully secured the building where the first 38 hostages were being held, encountering only light resistance. As they broke the lock on the prison door, Payne could see the expression on the hostages' faces change from fear and despair to excitement and joy. With the tension gone, some of them even began to cry. But for the special forces, the job was far from over. While the team was escorting the civilians outside, Payne received an alarming radio message. His comrades at the second building were making less progress and needed urgent help. The enemy had barricaded themselves and was resisting against the special forces with everything from grenades to suicide bombers. Payne could hear the noise of the battle all the way to his position and knew he had to act quickly. Saying, "Let's get in the fight," he led his men through the enemy gunfire to the hot zone. Arriving at the second building, he and a teammate climbed to the roof to engage the entrenched insurgents from above. From here, the team leader hoped to break the enemy's resistance, allowing the second team to advance. As the soldiers fought from the roof, they continued to take fire, not only from the enemy below, but also from the area around the prison. On top of that, the numerous explosions had set the building on fire. The flames spread to the upper floor, and some rooms were already filled with thick, dark smoke, causing the trapped hostages to run out of time. The risk of dying from smoke inhalation, or even being burned alive, increased with each passing minute. After Kurdish and American special forces made several attempts to establish fire superiority and storm the building, they were finally able to push forward, suffering heavy casualties. Payne climbed down to the first floor again, glanced at the prisoner's door, and realized it was secured with the same thick lock as in the first building. The battle for the hostages was still raging, and Payne was aware that to rescue them, he would have to expose himself not only to enemy fire, but also to the toxic smoke that filled the hallway. He had only a few seconds left to make a decision about the fate of the prisoners. He then grabbed a bolt cutter, and despite the enemy gunfire, ran to the steel door, where he cut the first lock. The hot air and smoke were unbearable, so he had to go back immediately to take a breath. But there was a second lock blocking the door, and the hostages were still trapped. The Kurdish forces tried to open the lock themselves, but to no avail, so Payne again rushed into the inferno and broke the second lock as well. The combined forces then cleared each room to eliminate possible threats and free all the hostages. At that moment, a second message came in over the radio. The building was too badly damaged and was already beginning to collapse. All forces were ordered to evacuate, but Payne knew there were still hostages inside. Therefore, he voluntarily went back into the building and ran through the hallway despite the raging fire, as well as the unclear enemy situation. Many of the hostages were confused and did not know what was going on, but Payne got them all outside. He then returned to the building 2 more times to make sure that no one had been left behind. Only when all people were safe, he left the hostile place and reported to his team leader that they were now ready to evacuate. When the special forces left the building complex, there were still enemies nearby, so they took the hostages in their midst and walked like a human shield to the right and left of them. However, the civilians were so traumatized that they would reflexively stop every time the soldiers opened fire, which delayed the evacuation. Therefore, the special forces decided to cease their own covering fire, exposing themselves to greater danger so that the hostages would no longer be frightened and keep running. After the group finally arrived at the helicopters, Payne faced another problem. Because they had freed so many hostages, it was unclear whether the helicopters could handle all the extra load.
After some quick calculations, they were able to get everyone on board, but it was so crammed that the soldiers had to spend the entire flight standing up. In total, 75 hostages were freed, 20 IS fighters were killed, and 5 others were detained. The hostages, Payne's strike team, and Kurdish partner forces returned to Erbil without incident. They had participated in one of the largest hostage rescues in Special Forces history. For his actions that day, Payne was awarded the Medal of Honor in September 2020. He is the first Delta Force member to receive this special award, still being alive. The first 2 medals have been awarded posthumously to the snipers Shugart and Gordon for their actions at the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993. Unfortunately, Joshua Wheeler, who had been hit during the assault on the prison, succumbed to his wounds. He had led his team relentlessly against the enemy forces to support his comrades from the other squad. When Wheeler was hit, he was at the head of his men. For the courageous action regardless of enemy fire, he was posthumously awarded the Silver Star.
And that was the first living Medal of Honor recipient from Delta Force. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States. Today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to be honest, smart, and beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.